and read some of what he's written, and then we'll have a discussion. And like I said, if you want to speak about personal things, you don't want to be live on YouTube, just let me know. You don't want to be in the recording, just let me know. I'll cut you out of the recording and we'll go off YouTube if that's what you want. But usually it's just me who speaks too much about personal things, and a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that. So I decided to record it so we can reach more people. And that's what we're doing here. So I've combined two groups. I've got the dating and relationship meetups that I just started and took over for one group in New York. And then I created another one here for Los Angeles. And then I'm also part of the Nonpartisan Red Pill Men's Group. And that's a group where we discuss dating, sexuality, women, relationships, and politics without all the right-wing crap. So, and then today we're going to be talking about the soulmate myth. And so we meet, let me put this in, we meet every month. So welcome to the Nonpartisan Red Pill Men's Group. We meet every month, and you can register for that meeting just like you did here. And that's at tinyurl.com/redpillmen. And today we're talking about the soulmate myth. And so I'm just going to start with his book. We're reading the section on the religion of the soulmate first. And basically what he does is he talks about how he was in a class, and when the class was asked about religion, they all said they were agnostic and they were atheist, or they were spiritual but not religious. And they sort of created religion and as sort of a way to deal with death, maybe part of a delusion. But when they asked whether there was that special person, that one person that was meant to be with you, they all raised their hand. They all believed in that there was this one person that they were meant. There's one man for every woman type of myth. And what we really know is that there's not one man for one woman. There's actually one man for multiple women and multiple men with no women. And that's what the situation is right now. And so, and then we were talking about just in the previous session, he was talking about one-itis, the idea that there's this one person and you fear losing that one person, or this is that person, and they're my soulmate, and that's it. And if I lose them, and so I'm just going to start reading now before he goes into it. So he says it's an irrational belief in predestination, or even amongst the least spiritual, that it's just a part of life to pair off with someone significant, and there was someone for everyone. And despite all odds, people largely feel entitled or deserving of an important love in their life. And statistically and pragmatically, though, this is ridiculous, he says. The feminized Disneyfication of this core concept has been romanticized and commercialized to the point of it becoming a religion. And he says the Shakespearean longing for the one, the search for another soulmate who was destined to be our match, has been systematically distorted beyond all reason. And as I'll elaborate later, men take their own lives in the delusion of having lost the one. And then we go into the men and the soulmate, and how men are affected. It says the perversion of the soulmate myth is attributed in large part to the feminized social conventions we deal with today. The fear of isolation from our imagined soulmate, or the fear of having irrecoverably lost the perfect one for us, fuels so much of the personal and social neuroses we find in the contemporary matrix of our society. For example, much of the fear inherited in the myth of the lonely old man loses its teeth without a core belief in the soulmate myth. The feminine imperative recognized the overarching power of the soulmate myth had over men and women from the beginning of the rise to ascendancy of the primary gender social imperative. And I think what he's talking about when he talks about the gender social imperative or the feminine imperative is the maximization of hypergamy. Is that right, Eric? You think he's talking about that? The maximization of hypergamy as the feminine imperative?
Probably. He does talk about that a lot in the book. I have not read all of the book, but that is a common theme, yes.
Yeah. So I think that that's what he means here, the feminine control of men, in the service of natural selection is another way of putting it.
Yeah.
Virtually all of the distortions of the core soulmate dynamic evolved as controlling schema for men. And I think what he means is that the soulmate is to control men's behavior, to get them to give up their sexual strategy, which is to spread their seed with as many women as possible, to go for that one woman. When it is soulmate women who are the primary reward for a soulmate necessitous man, there are a lot of opportunities to consolidate that power upon. And he doesn't think it's a fiendish plot of a femme-centric cabal socially engineering the soulmate fear into men. In fact, later on, he talks about how the soulmate myth really doesn't help women either. And but generations of men raised to be oblivious to it willingly and actively help perpetuate the myth. He says it's so and then he talks about the soulmate myth in women, and that he says hypergamy intensifies neurosis. Now, what hypergamy is the tendency of women to date laterally and up in the social hierarchy, financially, social status. They're always looking for someone better than them. And so that's what he means by hypergamy. Particularly, so that it says the languishing associated with pining for the alpha that got away, that women have these hot studs that they had when they were young, that they were trying to get, they were swinging for the fences, trying to get the richest, biggest, baddest guy they could, and they lost him, and they're never the same, is sort of that idea. I'm not sure how much that is true, but that's his point of view. Particularly when she's paired off with a long-term with a dutiful beta provider after her sexual market value declines. So the beta is the other side of the equation. Women need want a provider, they want money, and they want sex. They put it simply, they want a stud and they want big bucks. And so but they don't come in one package. And so they have to settle after they hit the wall, about 30, they have to settle for a guy that they might not have preferred, was not the alpha stud that they really, really wanted. And so, and the second sexual market value declining is a major part of his theory, that women peak in the 20s, men peak in their 30s, and then men maintain value much better than women do over time. So, and it's kind of a commodified market in a way. Let's see.
What page numbers are you on, Richard?
I'm on page 6 right now. So I turned from 5 to page 6, and I'm going to go into page 7, and that will be it. So he says, for women, the soulmate represents the nigh unattainable combination of arousing alpha dominance matched with a loyal providership for her long-term security that only she can tame out of him. It says hypergamy hates the soulmate principle. So because the soulmate is an absolute definition, whereas hypergamy must always test for perfection, hypergamy asks, is he the one? Is he the one? And the soulmate myth replies, he has to be the one. He's your soulmate. There's only one of those. So basically what that means is that it frustrates hypergamy in a way, because hypergamy means you're always looking for that bigger, better guy. You know, a lot of women reserve the right to always have their eye out for that bigger, better guy. And so, but when you get to the one, then, you know, that's the one. It frustrates hypergamy as well in that sense. And so he's on building the mystery. It says we want to build our intimate relationships into the soulmate idealism in order to relieve the fear and solve the problem. And the problem is both sexes will seek to perfect that idealization for themselves. Well, anyway. And then for women, the impact of the most significant alpha male is what initially defines the soulmate idealization. For men, it may be the first woman they become sexual with him, or the one who best exemplifies a woman he mistakenly believes can love him in a male-defined orientation of love. And what he means by that is that men feel that women should be able to love them for themselves. And we really love women for who they are because, hey, their physical presence, their body, their appearance is who they are. But women have all these other qualifications, and we have other qualifications too, make no mistake about that. But women tend to love us for what we do, what we provide, what we can do. And so there's a conflict there between his definition of the feminine version of love, which he describes as opportunistic love, or some people define it as consuming love, and the men's idealized version of love, which is to love a person for who they are. Mm-hmm. And so let's see. Yeah. So here she says is ridiculous. It's psychologically much more pragmatic to construct another person to fit that ideal than it ever will be to wait for fate to take its course. People subscribing to the myth would rather build a soulmate, consequences be damned. So women will attempt to build a better beta. That means building the provider, making him more sexual, or making him a better provider, or tame down an alpha, a guy who is out fooling around, who has a lot of women. And so that's their conception. While men will attempt to turn a whore into a housewife, or vice versa. So sometimes women don't come in one package either sometimes in that sense. And but if anything, it will free you to have a better, healthier future relationship with someone who is genuinely important to you. So dropping the soulmate myth isn't the nihilism a lot of people might have you believe it is. It's going to free you to a better, healthier future relationship with someone who you generally like, a relationship based on genuine desire, mutual respect, complementary understanding of each other and love, rather than one based on a fear of losing your one and only representation of contentment in life. In any relationship, and then he goes on to power, the one who needs that. And that will be the next chapter and our next discussion, which would be power in relationships. And he says, whether you want to base your relationship on power or not isn't the issue. It's already in play. You are acceptable to her for meeting any number of criteria, and she meets your own criteria as well. If this weren't the case, you simply would not be into initiate a mutual relationship. So I know some of you might think that, you're looking for your soulmate out there, but what Rollo Tomasi is saying, look for another person. There isn't this one person out there. You got to look for a person that's right for you, and those things: mutual respect, mutual desire. Relationships nowadays are based largely on mutual desire rather than on roles. I mean, women worked in the past, it wasn't like women didn't work, they worked, and men had roles and women had roles. And nowadays it's kind of like, well, those roles don't work because they're not same roles. But anyway, I don't want to digress. So now I'm opening it up to questions and comments on that.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. It seems like it makes both genders choosier. If you drop the soulmate notion, then we can be choosier, which does kind of decrease the amount of relationships that are actually happening. I think current statistics show that too. Like marriage is at an all-time low. And according to some other factors I'm not sure how they measure that, but that's things I've heard from credible sources,
Mhm.
But and then I'm curious if someone wants to comment on this. I mean, the last thing you said, Richard, is that women don't need men in the sense of the resources men can provide. I think a lot of them do, but not as much as in the past, not as much as 50, 60, 100 years ago, So if anyone wants to comment on that, I think it's probably true, although we also know we have an underclass in the United States that does not have sufficient resources. So, both may be true.
Well, what I'm thinking is, in the 1800s, maybe even into the 1900s, women had work to do, in their roles, taking care of, that was work, washing clothes by hand, everything by hand, making things I mean, women had a realm of work that they participated in. When we get to the 50s, we begin to see, this idea of this, and I'm not sure if it was an idea that actually came up of the trophy wife, right? Sort of the idea of, was this now the most beautiful woman we can, I guess, but that the women would stay home as a housewife, right? But it was less work than before, I think. But then we had in the 50s, I'd watch these programs, and man, boy, you ever watch Dobie
Dobie Gillis.
Dobie
Yeah.
Gillis, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the women, in the 50s, boom, you got to be rich, boom, boom. They're looking for that guy who's going to be rich. I mean, it sort of really seemed to evolve out of that, because before, you really needed a man if you wanted to start a family, work on a farm, whatever you had to do to make a living. Women and men worked together. So there was a need for that. And before that, there were arranged marriages, right?
Yeah.
So marriage was not romantic. And then we have development of romantic arrangements and ideas. And then we have the sort of a reduction in women's role in the home, where we're not out milking cows anymore, making everything from scratch anymore. Everything's convenient, and so you had Betty Friedan and the feminine mystique come out, with women discovering their, as I think I talked, is it discovering their washing machines, because those things used to rock a lot. And being unhappy as housewives. I mean, it was very unfulfilling for a lot of women who have a lot of potential. And so, but I think now we're, now we have a situation where women are out making their own money, but they can't get past what evolutionary psychologists would say is their sort of Neanderthal era sexuality, or something where a man has to, hypergamy. They can't get past hypergamy, in a sense. I mean, they can see different things as of value, it's not necessarily only money, but the idea that a man that they have to move up in the social ladder, means that men have to move down. Women want a man who's better than them, which means that men have to accept a woman who is less than them. And that's something that Orion Taraban taught recently.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
And so so that's where we're at. And I mean, the myth of the soulmate might cause us a lot of worry and angst that's just unnecessary. We're just human beings trying to meet our needs, and in a society and culture and with a evolution that can sometimes be toxic, on both sides, women and men. Our sexuality and our culture and our politics, obviously, and sexual politics can be very toxic. So, but yeah, so the soulmate myth is, does anybody believe in the soulmate myth? Anybody want to defend the soulmate myth here, even though or does anybody want to bring up some of their dating questions or issues, because we have this dating meetup as well, and how this pertains to actually dating? Don't all speak at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got anything to add there, Eric?
I mean, I don't believe in the soulmate notion anymore. But again, I think it's deeply embedded out there. I'm guessing, and this is a guess, I don't know this, but that maybe women believe in it more than men, but who knows,
Yeah, I think
but
probably men believe in it. Maybe even I wouldn't say that women believe in it more than men, but because men can believe in it too, quite a
yeah,
bit.
right, true, yeah.
But
So,
yeah, I was going to say something. Oh, I was going to tell you my personal story. Should avoid personal stories, but the idea that my high school sweetheart was my soulmate, right? I went to a psychic once who was doing a group reading that somebody lost their wife in the 1980s. I'm thinking, well, I lost my high school sweetheart. Actually, what happened is she went to go fool around and swing for the fences, and pulled some junk on me as well, which I've talked about before. But, and then thinking, by the time she hits 30, she could just roll on back to me, and that's so much what happens. If I was her soulmate, she walked away from me to go fool around and then lost it. Right. So that's something that sometimes comes up for me, and thinking about her. I don't even know if she still thinks about me. Occasionally I think about her, particularly some of the, since I've been dealing with some trauma in that regard. So
yeah, and I think that can happen with both genders too. Like the alpha widow, isn't that notion about a woman that, what you say, swings for the fences, but in baseball, when you swing for the fences too much, you tend to strike out mostly, like Dave Kingman, but so you're better off to go for the base hits or the base on balls and, move the runner along and all that stuff. But human psychology takes over, and a person wants what they want, but future planning might point to another way to go. But I mean, I think men do this too. You get attracted to a very beautiful woman and you have thoughts, and it's very human to think that, but it can lead certainly a man into trouble, I think. If you just base things on looks and not other things, that's volatile and dangerous for a man, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. We have other criteria too. We just don't, not physically attracted to that, but we do have,
Mhm.
standards, and men should have standards. And sometimes we don't have standards, and that creates a problem. We're willing to go with the first woman because many of us are starved sexually, that the feminine imperative that he talked about sort of depends upon sexual scarcity, creating sexual scarcity. That is to force men into relationships, and so women collude with one another and slut shame one another, and to make sure that they're not having sex with these men, so that these men are more desperate. That's how I feel that whole scenario on controlling access to sex is part of the feminine imperative. Kathy, I see you want to say something? Lisa? Okay.
Right. And I think that's a part of the red pill. It's some of these are hard truths in some cases, and they sound kind of harsh, but and I can't prove it right here and now, but I think most of these notions are true, and that there is this notion that, in the last 6 months, I was having a conversation with a woman, and she managed to get across the idea of, if you want a relationship with me, you have to pay for my roof repair and a house back east. And I just thought that's incredibly crass, incredibly callous, and just that was harsh. And so there are, you do now, not everybody is that way, thank goodness. Not all women are that way. But the fact that even 10 or 20% of them might be this way is kind of shocking. So there are some hard truths between the genders, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes also there's negativity towards men that women have. Um, if we stay focused on the soulmate myth there, we can might not get into trouble.
Yeah.
Might not get into trouble. But like, thinking the idea that men want to have sex with multiple women, and they'll have sex with anybody, and that they're just dogs and so forth. But hey, ladies, men are made to have sex. Men are made to make love to you. We're physically built to do that. So what the hell are you complaining about?
Yeah, I could see where they would want men to be nice towards them and behave in a civilized way, and if they click enough, then physical intimacy occurs. But also with something you mentioned earlier that I wanted to second is, yet men should have standards, and other than just physical things, they
Right.
should expect to be treated reasonably and with some politeness and that sort of thing. But that varies from man to man.
And even what you said, I'm go personal again. I'm dating a woman I've been with for a long time, right? And she's not really very aware, to tell you the truth. But the idea that I don't make as much money as her, and I don't have as much as her, and how she doesn't want to, in other words, and how her life, I don't exist in parts of her life. Her family doesn't know me, even though we've been together for 20 something odd years, and all my family knows, and the idea that she will criticize me and ridicule me, or what it's called, henpeck or whatever, because I don't meet those standards, and the idea that she's entitled to somebody who meets those standards, who is rich, who makes more money than her, and she feels entitled to that. And then the idea of hypergamy, where, yeah, of course, if a rich guy comes along. Lisa, did you want to say something? Yeah. That if a rich guy comes along, of course she's gonna jump on that if that guy comes along. So there's the idea that they're entitled to that guy, and they're entitled to monkey branch over to the guy if he comes along, because they're women and their role is to maximize natural selection, to optimize natural selection. So of course, you know, it doesn't matter whether it probably doesn't matter whether you're married, but certainly if you're not married, if a guy comes along who's better, you know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So,
But I
anybody
mean, I'm
want-
wondering if the women out there, I mean, how many women out there have this sense that men have to deal with this kind of thing? I mean, because women have all kinds of things to deal with men that I'm not thinking about that often, but I'd be curious to hear from some women about some of these issues.
or other men. How about you? I'll speak. How do you say your name?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So other things that yeah, so that's basically what the soulmate myth is about. And I would like to, you know, help some people, you know, with dating issues, or answer any questions about that. Because it seems like so many people have said, oh, that's what my woman said to me last night, you're my soulmate. And I was thinking, I'm doing a class tomorrow. I'm doing this thing on the myth of the soulmate. So I was thinking, you know, but I'm thinking I'm your soulmate, but I'm invisible. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'll just go with Spike here. My concern about this is that you guys seem to be missing quite a bit of the big picture. The way that people are is presented in church, in school, in normal society, where this masculine, feminine gender role thing is supposed to be. I believe personally the 70s came along, and you know, you were talking about the 50s where that shit was really ingrained. The 70s screwed the whole thing up because it brought women out of the house. You had women in the house with their laundry, irons, and refrigerators, no black ice coming up there. You know, you had a good gas furnace. You didn't have to see the coal man. So they had a lot of time. By the time the 60s were here, and, you know, the unrest, you know, racially, civilly, where kids wanted to be not their damn toys for their parents. They wanted to be individuals. They didn't all want to be the same guy with the white shirt, the penny loafers, the whole thing. The 70s put them out there together. They were separate. I was at a school where guys were on one side, girls were on the other side in the stairs, you know. But this stuff kind of changed in the 70s with the flower power and hippies and everybody can see, you know, it was segregated. But by then you had mixed groups. That was a taboo. It would no longer became war. All these kinds of people were doing things that you shouldn't do. So now the roles are being supported, keeping guys and girls in their place by making criminals go to jail. And when the criminals in jail, we'll give you some welfare for your money, for your, to keep your interest. What all this has done, it has messed up everything. And now nobody knows what to do because it's not strict anymore. And the rules have been bent, stomped on, changed. It's interesting that you guys are saying this, but the whole big picture is compressed, a little bit into why we're here. If you have a little background, and it can, I don't know, maybe make sense or maybe make no sense, but the change is that we don't have the gender role stability that we used to be. You know, it was okay to bash a homo, to bash a guy from another neighborhood race. Now you got to stop that, and people don't know what to do. America was the king of that stuff. Now America doesn't want to be the king of getting along. They like the way it was, but people want to get along. So the guys who are wanting to keep this crazy stuff putting up a big fight. But I think, you know, flower power people and their kids are going to take over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think so a little bit. That one thing I'll just add, and then Charmaine, if you want to speak, feel free. This is open discussion here. So that the sexual revolution has, what it did is sort of led to a type of polygamy, that the sexual revolution freed women to go and have relations with multiple men. And so of course they choose the hottest, best looking ones. And so they end up sharing those men, and then those men inevitably don't start a relationship with them. And then that man represents all men to them, when most men are invisible to women. And so so that's the sexual revolution has led to 30% of men being sexless. You know, 30% young men being sexless. They're not having any relations. They don't have a woman. They don't have that. That's what the sexual revolution, whereas it's led to.
In Japan, those guys in Japan, I think, is probably close to 70%. You see that, you know, like I said, the roles aren't fixed anymore. They let women go to work. These guys don't know what the hell to do. It used to be that's the way it is. You're the guy, you run things, da 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 da. It's over. And guys don't know exactly where they fit because it's been that way. It's dang near genetic, man.
Well, when you say genetic, and this is what evolutionary psychologists say, is that we have this sexual strategies that evolve over because of women's needs and men's needs as well. And also, you know, women bear children, men get women pregnant. So we need a woman to bear children. We don't need each man to impregnate women. One man can impregnate multiple women. So there's not a need for this other 30% of men out there who may not meet the standards that most women are looking for. And we talk about these increasing standards. They're not really increasing standards. Women are killing it, and men are being slaughtered.
Yeah.
Process.
Like I said, they've been trained out of the deal for the last 30 or 40 years. Like, you know, the white shirt and tie business is gone. You don't even see a white shirt and tie at a funeral anymore. It's nuts.
Yeah. I didn't understand everything you said there, but
the white shirt and tie, the whole idea of, the formalism is gone. It's casual. It's not just on Friday. And that was a hell of a thing to even have a casual Friday in the 80s. You know, it's people are trying to relearn their role, I think. And there are some people who were used to what it was, who are in the power positions. They don't want to lose power, and they're holding on and fighting like they're in a corner, you know. And it's different. It used to be not as competitive for everybody. Now it is competitive for everybody. You just exclude people. You've got people who cracked the glass ceiling. It's down to their damn waist. They're doing it, man.
So
Mr. Presido?
Hi, Kathy. Is it Kathy or Lisa?
Kathy.
Oh, Kathy, go ahead. Speak. If you have a camera, that would be great. If we could see you. If not, that's okay.
I just wanted to know, what did you mean when you said that men are invisible? What did you mean by that?
Well, the statistics are that most men are pretty much invisible to women. I mean, a lot of guys that don't meet women's standards for attractiveness or status are invisible to them. You know, they don't really see those men that they really don't want anything to do with. And that's a lot of men. So does that make sense, Kathy?
Yes, it does. And it affects them in, like you were saying, in negative ways.
Yeah, I mean, I have to acknowledge that men can do a lot to make themselves more attractive to women, to make themselves more visible to women. But yeah, I mean, just think about it. Human connection and intimacy is a human need. You know, it's not something that some men deserve and other men don't. You know, these men need affection, need that affection, and need that intimacy, really need a relationship with a woman. And yet, you know, a lot of them are just like young men. This is a good example because there's a lot of old, scraggly guys out there, you know, who probably no woman wants to touch, but young men, you know, between the ages of 18 and 30, you know, have to focus on their careers. You know, the only thing they can do is focus on their careers and wait until they hit 30. Unless you're a 6-foot stud, then you've got a bunch of married and older women who are willing to be with you and they go to the strip club to be with those young guys. But when or the bachelorette party, but basically when they're alone, you know, and these are good looking young men, they just don't have anything. You know, they can't really take you out on a date. They can't spend $200 to $300 on a date. You know, it's a high school date. You know, they take you to the movies, maybe they take you to dinner, you know, but they're not rich, they're not provider material, and they may not be really good looking in the sense of being average, you know, average men. And so they're alone, they're frustrated, they're turning to authoritarianism and right-wing extremism because they're you know, they're being slaughtered in that sense. You know, they have these needs and they can't get them satisfied. So they just have to focus on the career and wait until they're 30 to really start having any type of action for a lot of these men. Did I go off? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, well, here's something that I've found. And I guess as you were commenting, Richard, about your relationship with your girlfriend, it seems like there is, you know, there's a lot more of whether it's like, you know, kind of that like power thing or victim bully, whatever you want to call it, that it's like sometimes it's the, you know, the man who's the bully and sometimes it's the woman who's the bully. And then sometimes it seems like it's like this power play or something. I don't understand it, but what I've found is, so I was married for like 16 years and not right away, but like, you know, the last few years he became emotionally and verbally abusive. And it's just like, what the hell? And I mean, I tried, you know, we tried to work on the marriage, but in the end, he didn't stop doing that. So I divorced him. And then he married someone, and then he kind of took the role of victim. And then now his wife even physically and verbally and emotionally abuses him. So it's like I've sometimes have seen that pattern, and it's interesting. But then like with myself, I mean, I've, you know, and maybe this is why I never get dates. I don't know, or something I put out there, but it's like, I will not settle for anything less than equality on both ends. It's not like, you know, I need to, you know, put down my spouse or boyfriend, whatever, because of whatever reason, nor can he. And it seems like, especially in today's world, it's like there's always this contest or this power, and it's just, it's really frustrating. So, and I've just heard so many people that have that, some type of thing where it's like that, kind of like that power play where, so that's
Well,
my,
yeah, Lisa, that's actually the very next thing that Rollo Tomasi talks about in his book, and that's what we'll be talking about next week, is power in relationships. So I think it is very connected to this, because he connects it to the soulmate myth. It's the very next section of the book. So and actually what he says is about power. The main thing he says is that the person who needs the other person least is the one with the most power. And but I am not prepared to talk about that section of the book.
right.
Yeah, and I think yeah, the thing that people do, yeah, I mean, we grow up with that's one reason why I'm in the relationship, because of, growing up with people with personality issues. But anyway, I forgot what else I was going to add to that, what you said, Lisa. Um, can you tell me once again what, summarize what you just said so I can remember it?
Oh, just that quite often, whether it used to be more often that like the male would sometimes be, the bully, we'll say. And the wife was, the victim or the person bullied. And then but now it's like, as things have changed, is quite often both. That it's like sometimes it's the man who's the bully and sometimes it's a woman who's the bully, but there's a tendency for people in relationships to even if it doesn't start out that way, it's like eventually there tends to be this power play where one person thinks that they need to kind of like put the other person down or kind of bring them down in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that some of that has to do with personality issues and their particularly narcissism.
Yes.
So and the thing is, here's one thing to think about when you talk about a commitment to equality, because I had a commitment to equality because when I had a mystical conversion experience in a feminist studies class in college, and I minored in women's studies. It was called the Study of Women and Men in Society at the University of Southern California. And then and I did some writing and stuff like that, but I would say, hey, we're equal, pay your way. I mean, I was a college student, I didn't have a lot of money, but at the same time, I really felt, why should I have to pay for a date? Why am I paying for a date? Why am I the one paying? What, doesn't this woman want to be with me? We're supposed to be equal here, and what I didn't understand at the time was that, well, it's part of the seduction process. That's one way of saying it, for a man to pay for the date. There's traditional things, but women really, they always want their cake and to eat it too. They want equality on one hand, but then they want a traditional relationship on another. And the traditional relationships are based on inequality. So, so the idea that, we demanding equality, I would love if a woman demanded equality and treated me equally, but we have a tendency to be competitive, right, in a sense, in that the woman's trying to
Exactly.
trying to lock down, right, and the man's trying to get the best woman he can, best looking woman, I guess, I don't know. But yeah, so and there was one more thing I was going to say about that, but I forget what that was. Yeah.
Well, if I could just ask Lisa, if you could elaborate on what is your idea of equality, and if you could include like who pays for dates and stuff like that. I'd be curious to hear the woman's perspective on that.
Okay. I mean, I guess for paying for dates, I mean, it maybe depends. I mean, if like if one person makes a lot more money, then they should maybe pay for, more of the dates, not all of them. But if they make the same amount, then, they should, take turns paying. And, but I mean, I guess for equality, what I meant more about was just the way that you treat each other. It's like, thinking that, okay, I'm better than my spouse because I make more money, or because I'm cuter, or because I'm whatever, and then just berating the, significant other, and berating them and bringing them down, and then making them feel terrible is that's, or maybe just like bickering at them constantly about like just every little thing. I mean, that's the as opposed to trying to be a part of the solution. And I think it might partly come from all of this from misinterpretation of like religion and Christianity, because it's like there's some people, Christians, who believe that's like the man is always in charge and da da da, because of things that it says in the Bible. But it's like my interpretation of that is it's like we're all God's children, so therefore he doesn't treat his children differently. Why should we treat each other differently? But in relationships. But I think a lot of that kind of does come from Christianity.
Yeah.
I would address and say sometimes we want to look at things like Christianity and make them the boogeyman here. But one of the truth is that sort of inequality is built into hypergamy. It's built into females. Nature, not nature saying their evolutionary evolved nature. Now, I'm going to say that women can and should control their own behavior, and that they're not bound by their evolutionary psychology, because we men are not bound, because we men have a lot of things from our desires and wants from our Neanderthal sexual sort of evolution, but we don't act on all of them, thank God. And at this point in time, women need to not act on some of these things, like demanding that a man make more money than you. I mean, that's a minimum standard for a lot of women. But hey, where's the equality? You're not making room for equality. You're going to eliminate a lot of men. And other men might complain about contributing to the household, and the idea that somehow it seems to me that women always have to be in the black financially in the relationship, that a relationship becomes a profit-making enterprise for women. And the idea that women will always cost more. When Orion Terabin says, women will always contribute less than they cost, because then you contribute, because they're using it's basically a sexual type of thing, that they have that lever or that evolution. They demand a man who's better than them. That's what women are looking for, is a man that's better than them. Now, on the other hand, that narcissistic, because people feel entitled, both men and women feel entitled to their list of things, especially if they're narcissistic. And so my girlfriend feels entitled to a man who makes more money than her. Now, might be say in the next breath, she says, I just need a good man. I make my own money. But then the very next breath, so basically they feel entitled to that. So they're willing to ridicule, just henpeck, just criticize you because you don't meet the standards that they feel they're entitled to. And then also, sometimes we talk about how we treat each other. And we talk about it in terms of what we think from our political perspectives, from modern thinking, from feminist ideas, or whether maybe it's conservative, whatever, but we express these things, but then the dynamics of the relationship are not necessarily like that. In other words, do women really want a man to treat them as their equal? Maybe not in the bedroom, right? So there's a psychological need that sort of is built in, that sort of, even though we intellectually think that we should be this way, things like sexuality, we are not what, in our sexuality, we're often not what we feel we are or should be. And so, but in other ways, a woman, so we have this idea that a woman wants to be treated equally, but then if a woman loses respect for a man, right, then she also cannot love a man that she doesn't respect and, in a sense, look up to. So sometimes these things are traps, the woman says, we want to be equal, but their nature or their sexuality demands something different. It demands a man to be dominant, to be powerful, to be strong, to be rich, right? So, so we're sort of caught in this idealized version of a pro-feminist reality that we want to reach, of equality and treating the other with fairness, but we're blocked by this sexual desire to be dominated or to dominate or to be overwhelmed in that type of relationship. And even in our relationships, we want a man to be, women often want a man to be in control, to make the decisions, to drive the car, to pay for the dates. It's not an equal situation. And a woman doesn't actually want the equal situation because she wants a man, and a man is not her equal, in a sense that she seeks and desires a man who is superior to her, rather than someone who is at the same level or below. So
I mean, I see your point. I just don't agree with it. I mean, and I think it goes both ways, that, what you just described, men can be like that too, but, and maybe it just is about, healing. I mean, both for men and women. It's like, there was a time when I would put up with, being, dominated and didn't like it, but didn't know how to get out of it. But then once I did just some work within, and now it's just like, it's a no-brainer. It's like, no, I, need equality in every way. And if not, I'm just not interested. And maybe that's kind of the vibe I put out there, which is maybe why I never get dates. I don't know, but it's
maybe it's actually you end up not interested because equality is boring.
I don't think so. I mean, the opposite is so frustrating. And I mean, I came from a family where, just, my mom was, emotionally abusive to my dad. And then, like, with my sisters, it's like, then my oldest sister, she's kind of abusive to her husband, but then my other sister, not abusive, but just, it's just not equal, I should say. And then my other sister, it's the other way around. Then it's like her husband is, yes, dear, no, dear, whatever you say, dear. And she just doesn't have a voice. Just like my brother-in-law, my other sister, he doesn't have a voice. And it's like, no, I want a voice, and I want an equal voice, not just a 49% voice or a 25% voice. It has to be 50. So.
Yeah, well, everybody wants a voice. I think it's sometimes part of what's going on here is yeah, sure, everybody wants to be treated fairly and equally. Now, we have to say that men have always complained about the fact that women like jerks and have gone off with the bad boy. and actually the guy treats them horribly, but the fact that he treats them horribly actually communicates that he's high value because he doesn't need her. So that's sort of the conflict.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
happens.
Seen
Yeah.
that.
And but when we talk about financial into the household, contributing financially to the household, when we talk about paying for dates, when we talk about man making less than you, being in a relationship with a man who earns less than you or has less than you, then the equality equation sort of is not emphasized. That part of equality is not emphasized. Whereas to me as a man, if I want an equal relationship, that is what I'm going to emphasize in that relationship. And of course, I'm going to treat people fairly. That's my personality. And there's a lot of abuse out there, and you have to go to therapy and deal with it. And I've had to deal with it. Yeah, I still have to deal with it. But ultimately, if we want equality, it's not just I want to be treated equal. It's I want to be treated equal too. We both want to be treated equally, not just a one-sided thing, because sometimes we might think that, oh, it's women who've been oppressed and men are the oppressors, which is really a negative view of men. But and so it's only women that need to rise up to equality. They don't have to treat men equally as equals, and they often don't. Sometimes we're inferior, sometimes we're superior. All depends on what they want from us. But that I think everybody wants to be treated fairly and treated right, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want something a little different, and sometimes the people who are too nice, right? People who are too nice, sometimes people don't like that either. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, right. I agree. So being too nice all the time does not work for men, but there are dominant women out there. I mean, and yes, traditionally men were dominant, but even then there were exceptions. And so it's hard. But sometimes men would like reciprocity too, I think is important. And the idea is not that it'd be exactly the same thing, but just some sort of analogous situation, like you do something for her, she does something for you, something like that. And they can be different things, probably are. So, the whole idea of equality sometimes isn't the main point. It's are you both putting effort into the relationship and that kind of thing. And yeah, sometimes one does a lot more than the other, and that gets tiring for men. Probably women in that position too, but
there's one thing. Yeah, what was I going to say? I forget, but yeah, never mind. It slipped my mind. But what do you think, Lisa?
Yeah. And I agree that it's not just about women, wanting, or like me wanting equality. And I guess I didn't mention this, but then I also want it the other way too, where the man has equality, where I'm still, and maybe it's just because of life experiences that I've been through like so often, that it's like, no, I'm just determined to either have that or have nothing. I'm just not buying the whole thing that it's has to end up. But I guess I wouldn't let it end up being anything but equal in every regard, not just the in terms of who pays for who, or just all of that. When I was going through before I was going through my divorce, and read this book. It was Getting the Love That You Want, and it was really good. And I guess it talked about that among other things, this tendency of like when a man or a woman, they'll say they have a bad relationship with someone, and they break up, and then they go out and they find someone exactly like their last significant other, and that doesn't work. And it's just like this pattern of like the same type of person over and over again, and how it kind of, it relates back to your childhood of whether it's your parents or siblings or what have you, of like, but especially like parents, is like if you didn't get the love that you wanted, whatever that aspect was with, like, say, one of your parents, then when you have your relationships in life, you're going to try to get the love or whatever was missing that you didn't have from, one or both of your parents in a relationship. And then it just keeps happening over and over again until you heal yourself from, from all of that, which then goes on, and there's all sorts of different, and it's really kind of it's because it's from childhood and it started so young. It's like, sometimes things like, EMDR or hypnosis, things that just kind of really get at or biofeedback, things that just really get at rewiring the brain and the subconscious is sometimes, for me anyway, has been like the only thing that really, I could do talk therapy until the end of time and it just didn't help. So.
Yeah, I remember where I was going to say that, our sexualities were so much not what we think we should be or are. I mean, we talked about last week, or a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the virtuous women myth. And, the women are not dominatrix. They're not dominant in the bedroom. They're not, generally speaking. I mean, as far as my experience, and I believe that they want the man to be in control in that situation. They want the man to do the work, in a sense. They want the man to be powerful, to be dominant in that situation. And so that is sort of, we want to try, sometimes we want to disconnect our sexualities from the way that we are and act as if that's a sort of totally separate realm in which we get to be things that maybe we don't want to be in real life, but so there's this sense that there is a submissive feminine aspect to women that is both innate and attractive, but also they're not being dominant. They don't want it. They don't want to be dominant in that context. So it's kind of like, how can they be dominant outside? There's a sort of sense that there are parts that where women want men to be dominant and in control in their life, and parts where they want equality. So this idea that you have to have absolute equality in all things sort of belies the fact that you actually don't want absolute equality in all things. There's times when you want a man to be in control. There's times when you want a man to be dominant. There's times when you want a man to be strong. There's times when you want a man to be a leader. And many women are looking for those traits in a man already. That's what is attractive to women, that they are leaders, that we are leaders, that we are strong, that we are dominant, that we are powerful, that we're socially high up in the status. And so there's that conflict there that you have to deal with, rather than demanding absolute equality but really not, because there's other parts of your life where you don't want that, other aspects.
Let me just jump in here. I agree, Richard. And I think one of those areas where women like to be dominant is home decorating in a marriage.
Yeah.
Man, with the family I came from and my marriage, man, oh man, I caught all kinds of pushback when I wanted to be involved with that. And I was paying for, 90 to 99% of it. So it made sense to me. But my wife at the time, I don't think was a fan of that. But it should be fair to both, I believe.
Yeah. Well,
I think.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, maybe the as far as like the the dominance thing, um the way that you'd still have equality is there are certain things that men might have more dominance in, and then certain things that women do. And but if it's still equal in the end, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, yeah, there might be different areas where, okay, in this area, you're in charge. In this area, I'm in charge. And that doesn't mean though that the other person can't have, that there isn't like input from the other, but then in the end, it still kind of averages out.
At this point, we're talking about complementary, which is sort of has been more of a conservative. Women are not and men are not equal, but they complement each other in certain ways. And so, but there is, like you said, in the end, there is an equality, particularly the equality of the soul, the equality of a person, that as persons we're equal, but in our roles, we may sometimes be unequal in certain roles that we play. And so if you get too strict about, oh, it needs to be equal all the time, we won't reflect upon or take into account the times when we don't want it to be equal. And so, yeah, I think men want equal relationships, Lisa. I don't think that the fact that, and that's another thing that women do, is they say, if I can't get this, I'm not having anything, right? That's a tendency for women. If I can't get this kind of guy, I don't want any guy. And so that's a problem in itself, that women tend to have a tendency to retire from the business of relationships, and in part because women treat relationships like a business. And so so the idea that if I don't have this equality, I don't want any relationship, is kind of a problem. And if you end up outside with no relationship, right? If you end up saying, I'm going to be asexual, I'm not going to have a relationship, or maybe you're not asexual, you have some type of stuff, but I mean, that's a problematic solution right there. It's like, I'm going to kill myself if I can't get what I want, and but yeah, but I think men want equal relationships. That's what we're striving for. And what we're finding is we don't have it. We don't have it. And part of that is because of sexual marketplace value. Part of that is because women are the gatekeepers of sex and men are the gatekeepers of relationships. So so there's this tug and pull, women trying to get as much as they can, and for as little sex as they have to give up sometimes. That's what Orion Taraban says. It's hard to believe that, because I think women actually want sex, but maybe they don't want sex with the guy they're married to or the guy they're with. But in any case, trying to get as much for as little sex as they can give, and men trying to get sex and trying to minimize the loss of the resources that they have to pay in order to get access to sexual intimacy with a woman. So that sort of dynamic is inherent in our relationships, which is a power dynamic and sometimes very manipulative. So yeah, so that's so I don't know, does that make any sense to what you were talking about, Lisa?
I mean, somewhat. I guess, when it's equality, I mean, it's not like maybe the difference is equality versus being henpecked or being verbally abused. And I guess sometimes when it goes, I mean, it's not like it has to be like a very specific 50-50 thing, but it sort of does. So I mean, I guess, and Yeah, I guess I'm just, I'm just not necessarily, I'm, I understand what you're saying. I'm not necessarily in agreement of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
it sounds like you're okay with a rough equality, different categories. Would that
Oh
be
yeah, like I say, I mean, if I go fishing, I mean, I used to love to fish, but I never did learn how to take the fish off the hook or cut a fish. So it's like if I had a relationship and a guy was into fishing and he could do that, that would be great. And that's a guy job, But then there might be something that he just can't stand doing. We'll say like cleaning the toilet or something, or mowing the lawn or something, and that's something I love. So I mean, it's just kind of comes down to sometimes just uh, figuring out each individual thing,
yeah,
whatever those things are.
yeah. Well, absolutely, abuse, verbal or physical, is unacceptable at any time. And sometimes it takes recognizing that that's happening, because sometimes it can be sort of subtle, that type of abuse. For
Yeah,
especially,
and it can be very slow and just you don't see it coming. It's just like a little bit at a time, and it's like a mold that grows. It just starts as a little spotted mold, and before you know it, you have this black mold all over your house. It's
so,
so.
and there's one, like, I want to assure you, a lot of men want equality. Now, a lot of this conservative stuff and crap that's coming out, about let's return back to traditional relationships, BS. Part of that is women. Women want traditional relationships. Most women want a traditional dating relationship. That's the fact. So what men deal with is that women want equality until they don't want equality. And so women don't want equality. They want inequality, and they want equality until but when the traditional roles and activities benefit them, then they don't want equality. And so it's up to men to sort of stand up and say, oh, wait a minute here, you want equality, but hey, you're making me pay for this. I'm the, responsible for all of this, and so I want to encourage you, because we're struggling with equality, and it's not just a one-sided thing. It's not just that men don't want equality and women want equality. It's that both sides want equality, but both sides in some sense don't want equality either in certain ways. And so we're all struggling with that. So that's to actually find relationships that are equal and create those relationships. So I wouldn't just dump a guy because something's unequal about it. Because
Oh, right. I mean, there's always kind of, negotiations and working things out and
right.
all
And,
of that, of course. So,
and I would look and make sure that I myself actually want equality, and not in a way that says, okay, well, I don't want equality here, but I want equality over there, and therefore I should have both. No. The guys have got to learn to stand up to women, and say, hey, this is unfair to me. And that's, for me, it's me having to pay for everything is unfair to me. It's unfair to me that you expect me to make more than you or have more than you. It's unfair to me, and also to expect me to be the tough one, the stoic one, the silent one, the non-emotional one. And women want to say, oh, we want men who are emotionally available. The reality is that they don't. They want men who are men, and men are not emotional. So these are the stereotypes, and men really can't be themselves in relationships with women, because women want something and they're not, and men have to hide, our actual who we are, so that women can discover us slowly, or else they'll lose interest. So we have to be a certain way, And so there's that thing that we're right now we're in a relationships are changing, and the whole dynamic is changing, and we have equality, some level of equality financially. And more women are making more money. Women are getting degrees. Men are not getting the degrees. Women are having buku sex and opportunities for sex. Men are being not having any sex at all. You know, it's a situation that we're in right now. And so I wouldn't jump out and say, I demand an equal relationship, as if the man on the other side doesn't want an equal relationship too, because most of us do. You know?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there may
Right.
be some who think a traditional relationship is better and have more power, and there are abusive people too. But I think we're struggling to find that equal relationship now, and not to give up on trying to find equality in relationships, because it's not as simple as it seems, I think.
Oh, right. I think it's something that might need to be, like if you find someone, you'd have to work on it. And, as long as there seems like there's hope, then, that would be totally fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you for contributing. Not everybody does that.
Yeah.
And,
Thank
Yeah, you bet.
Mhm.
You bet.
so we're coming to the end of the time here. If anybody wants to say anything, otherwise we're done. Come sign up next week to come. We're going to be talking about power in relationships, reading this the next chapter in Rollo Tomasi's book. And I'll see you guys all next week. Thank you for coming today, everyone. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.